Hello, students, and welcome to our final full lecture of the semester for this course on Introduction to Buddhism. We're going to be looking at our final branch, major branch of Buddhism, and that branch is Vajrayana Buddhism. Let's take a look. All right. And before I begin, let's just take a look at what we have behind me today. Very beautiful structure made of sand and made from hands. And this is called a mandala. A mandala has many different meanings depending on the religious tradition in which it's being used. In Vajrayana Buddhism, which we'll be studying today in class, the mandala represents the enlightened universe of a Buddha. This is where a Buddha will live. This is the home of the Buddha, and through different practices of meditation and through different rituals and with the guidance of a qualified teacher, there's a belief that one can enter and actually with one's own mind create this enlightened universe and quickly become a Buddha and thus escape cyclic existence or samsara. Let's take a look at Vajrayana Buddhism. So Vajrayana Buddhism, Vajra can mean thunder or diamond. So this is the thunder or diamond vehicle. Thunder, it's something powerful, it roars. A diamond is indestructible. Vajrayana Buddhism is sometimes also called Tantric Buddhism. Tantra are a genre of religious texts found in Hinduism, Buddhism, and in other religions as well. And so Tantric Buddhism. And the Vajra represents a diamond or thunder scepter. So this is the Vajra that you can often find in Vajrayana Buddhism. And it's the pure and indestructible awakened mind of a Buddha. So Vajrayana is going to build on many of the ideas we learned about in Mahayana Buddhism, such as that all beings that have consciousness, all sentient beings, have this capacity to become an enlightened being, to become a Buddha, and that one's mind in its pristine form, in a form that's not governed by the three poisons, this mind is the mind of a Buddha, and one can awaken that mind through morality, meditation, and wisdom. So Vajrayana is the esoteric. By esoteric, we can mean it's meant kind of for more of a select few. It's supposedly secretive. And this is the form of Buddhism we find predominantly in Tibet and in the Himalayan regions. There's an additional map. Although you do also find elements of Tantric Buddhism or Vajrayana, perhaps in some of the traditions that we find in East Asia. Mahayana and Vajrayana are very close, have a very close relationship in terms of religious ideas and beliefs. All right. Imagination is real magic. Imagine. Well, that's a lot of what we're going to be doing as we learn about Vajrayana Buddhism. Vajrayana Buddhism truly believes in this ultimate capacity of the human imagination. In that, Vajrayana Buddhism will involve techniques of imagining oneself as a fully enlightened being, as a Buddha, with the body, speech, and mind of a Buddha. One will also imagine oneself, and this is a technique of meditation, often with corresponding rituals such as the recitation of holy words or mantras, the use of hand gestures or mudras. So these imagined acts and corresponding performances of imagination, one imagines oneself as an enlightened being with the body, speech, and mind of an enlightened being, living inside the abode of an enlightened being. And that abode, that home of an enlightened being, is our mandala. Some of the foundations of Vajrayana Buddhism. So compassion. Like Mahayana, Vajrayana has this ideal of becoming a Buddha for the benefit of all sentient beings. And one ideally ought to be motivated by this ideal of thinking that all beings were once one's mother, and that in order to save our suffering mothers who are in the hell realms or in the animal realms, the hungry ghost realms, the best way to do that is to become a Buddha. And the Buddha, the Vajrayana, is parts of Bodhisattva training, but this is a very quick training. Vajrayana has this notion that one can quickly perfect the path of the Bodhisattva and quickly, in one lifetime, in this very lifetime, become a Buddha. The Vajrayana has a strong emphasis on emptiness, that there is no inherent fixed reality. Even becoming a Buddha is dependent upon different causes and conditions that will give rise to the states of enlightenment. And this notion of Buddha nature, that all beings have the capacity to become a Buddha. All right, and this is the key fundamental practice of Vajrayana Buddhism, is imagining oneself as a Buddha so as to quickly become a Buddha. So what is Vajrayana? Vajrayana is the Vajra vehicle or diamond vehicle. It has this ideal of rapid Buddhahood, becoming a Buddha very, 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 very fast in one lifetime. Vajrayana is said to be advanced practices intended for only a select few disciples. These practices are supposedly secret, although they're often very public, some of these performances. And the root is the guru-disciple relationship, the teacher-student relationship. Also called, this Vajrayana is also called Tantrayana, the Tantra vehicle. Yana means vehicle. For example, Mahayana, Maha means great, Yana means vehicle. Mahayana was the great vehicle. This is the diamond vehicle or the tantric vehicle. So what does one do in the practice of Tantra, in the practice of the Vajrayana? Well, first of all, this is the Buddha in the form of Vajradhara. According to this theory of Vajrayana, the Buddha teaches different things to different disciples, and sometimes will take on different forms. For the select, the elite, those disciples who are ready for the most advanced teachings, Vajrayana claims those disciples could see Buddha. Remember, this is the being that Siddhartha becomes. One could that these select few disciples could see the Buddha looking like this, like Vajradhara, this very special, specific body that could only be seen by a select few disciples. So Tantra was taught by the Buddha supposedly to the top students, those who were prepared for these teachings and techniques. So and this will mirror everything. One has to be taught by a qualified guru. And there's a notion of lineage that one's teacher was taught by another teacher, by another teacher, by another teacher, ultimately going all the way back to the Buddha as Vajradhara. The disciple will then engage in a variety of meditative practices and rituals. And the rituals include things that maybe we've seen some of the videos, like chanting mantras, doing prostrations or bowing down. One will take on, through these practices, the persona, the character. One is going to imagine that one is an actual Buddha, that one is no longer one's ordinary self, but that an enlightened being. And acting out the role of the Buddha through meditation and yoga, one transforms the ordinary mind into the mind of the Buddha. So imagining oneself as a Buddha, engaging in different meditative practices. And we haven't talked much about yoga in this class, and I do this more in my more advanced courses, engaging in different yogic techniques. The body, speech, and mind becomes transformed into that of an enlightened being. Tantra is ideally practiced for the well-being of all. One wants to become a Buddha, not for fame or wealth, but to be able to guide all other beings to freedom from samsara. And this is the Mahayana attitude, the altruistic attitude, the desire to become an enlightened being for the well-being of all others. This is also it's also a quick and dangerous path to Buddhahood. One of my students in the past semester referred to this as the fast and furious Buddhism. So one can quickly arrive at the state of becoming an enlightened. One can very, 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 very quickly escape samsara, but it's also danger. One can crash and burn. And it said one can be born into these really horrible hell realms if they kind of slip up if they on the path of this practice. So therefore, one has to have a qualified teacher, a guru. The guru will lead the students through a variety of practices. The first fundamental practice is that of visualization or imagining. So one visualizes the guru and the teacher. One will visualize the central tantric deity. This is the being that lives in the middle of this structure behind me, in the middle of the mandala. All right, and this will be visualizing the abode of the mandala. Now, a guru in Tibet is where really Vajrayana Buddhism is most prevalent, although we see also aspects of it in Nepal and other parts of Asia. You have many different gurus and lamas. This is the Dalai Lama. The Dalai Lama, and some of you may have heard of him, and I think in this week's module, you'll be watching a short video about him. The Dalai Lama has traditionally been the spiritual leader of most Tibetan people, not all. And he would also be at least the nominal, at least by name, the head of the Tibetan government. This is prior to China taking over Tibet and annexing Tibet. the Dalai Lama would be at least the official figurehead and would reside in Tibet's historic capital city of Lhasa. Tibetans believe he is an incarnation of the Buddha of compassion. Chenrezig in Tibetan is the name of that Buddha of compassion. That Buddha of compassion is Avalokiteshvara in Sanskrit, and then in China, there's a feminine form called Kuan Yin. This is another famous Tibetan master called the Karmapa. These are all high gurus, high lamas. Down here, we see a picture of a young child. This is the Panchen Lama. The Panchen Lama historically has been a very powerful Lama in Tibet, sometimes equal or of higher power to that of the Dalai Lama. Well, the previous Panchen Lama, the Panchen Lama, when he died, there was a political dispute about finding his reincarnation. There's a belief in Vajrayana that these gurus, these lamas, they can be reborn in the world at a time, place, and form of their choosing. And they'll give clues to their disciples as to where to find their reincarnation. The Panchen Lama, the Chinese government wanted to install their own Panchen Lama. The Dalai Lama recognizes another child, this child, as the official Panchen Lama, and then the Chinese government takes him and puts him somewhere. We don't know where. All right. The central practice is the visualization of what's called a yidam. This is called a tutelary deity. A yidam is an enlightened being, and this is an example of a picture here. I believe this is this is Kala Chakra, one of the popular yidams in Tibetan Buddhism. And often there is a sexual imagery, and the sexual imagery represents a perfect physical and mental union of wisdom and compassion, the two attributes that must be perfected to become a fully enlightened Buddha. So what is a tutelary deity or yidam? What is that? What is this picture that we're seeing? It's a symbol. It symbolizes, again, wisdom and compassion. It is a tool for tantric practice. It's a tool for engaging in these meditations under the guidance of a guru. The yidam represents a fully enlightened being and perfect wisdom and perfect compassion. These are all things symbolized by the yidam. The yidam also shows the Buddha nature, the capacity to become a Buddha. So it's not a real entity apart from the mind. That's what most Buddhist masters would say, is that this is very kind of complicated. Does the yidam exist on its own apart from the mind? It's a little bit complicated, that question. But most, and let's go back. Imagining oneself as this being with, let's say, another being as one's partner, one's consort. This is imagining one's mind as generating wisdom and compassion. This is imagining oneself as realizing that innate potential to become a Buddha. Okay, and ultimately it's a pure mental projection and emptiness. This is something that does not exist eternally, but is the product of different dynamic processes that give rise to it. All right, so is this a deity in the Abrahamic sense? Is this a god per se? Maybe that's something to think about in our discussion boards for this week online. And where does Where does this visualized deity, this Yidam, live? It lives in the mandala. This is a symbol, an object of visualization, and it's the residence of the Yidam. And here's the Dalai Lama explaining it. The Dalai Lama explains that the image of the mandala is said to be, and this is the quote, extremely profound because meditation on it serves as an antidote, quickly eradicating the obstructions to liberation and the obstructions to omniscience, as well as their latent predispositions. The obstructions to liberation, the obstructions to omniscience are the two main types of mental inflictions that inhibit one's attainment of Buddhahood. The mandala serves as a representation of an awakened mind that is free of all such obstacles. And in the context of tantric practice, it is a powerful symbol of the state that meditators are trying to attain. So in the ideal of Vajrayana Buddhism, a Buddha is a being that is completely liberated from samsara and is a being that's omniscient, that knows everything. We all have that capacity to arrive at that state of becoming a Buddha. Well, why aren't we a Buddha already? We have these obstacles. Generating this mandala through meditation helps remove those obstacles to becoming liberated from samsara and awakening the omniscient, the all-knowing Buddha mind. Mandalas can be mental visualizations. And remember, at the heart, the mandala is the home of the tutelary deity residing in the center of the circle. Mandalas can be formed in paintings, and we can also have what's called a sand mandala. In the sand mandala, we can see the depiction behind me. And what we're going to do is we're going to look a little bit at a video that will show how a sand mandala is made. Let's take a look. So this is a mandala that's being made, is being sponsored. We can see the monks, this is very quickly going through and they're assembling the different parts. And over the course of several days, they'll work together to use sand to construct the enlightened abode of a Buddha. Now it's going very fast, the video, but it's actually a very, very slow process. A tool that's being used puts out one little grain of sand at a time. The tutelary deity, the enlightened being, will preside in the middle. These are the different outer layers of the royal palace, that is the mandala. Different spectators will come and see the mandala, and this is believed to be a source of blessing. Now the mandala has arrived at its more or less complete. And now the process of dissolving the mandala, of dismantling the mandala. Because remember, all things are empty. They lack this permanent, eternal existence. So now the monks will begin the process of eradicating the mandala, dissolving the mandala. All right, so that was the design of a sand mandala. In the end, there'll be a concluding ceremony for for dissolving the mandala. All right, let's take a look here. Now, sometimes the mandalas can have a three-dimensional structure, and often these will not be dissolved. They'll be monuments. All right, what does the mandala do? The mandala replaces the ordinary world with the enlightened universe of the tantric deity. So our senses, our notions of who we are, our fixations on our belongings and our body, all of that is replaced by visualizing an imagined, perfectly enlightened world that is the mandala. Doing this meditation will remove obstacles to liberation and omniscience. These are the obstacles to becoming a Buddha for the benefit of all sentient beings. So ultimately, the mandala and the practices of just putting together the mandala, either as in the form of sand or something that we visualize in our minds, these are tools and practices for transforming our mind and our consciousness. And the mandala represents, and the mandala again is ultimately something that we create and project with our mind, but it's a universe, an imagined universe that in many ways is more real than the universe that we see and hear every day. This is a universe of the pure mind, and this is a mind that has a perfect union of the qualities of compassion and wisdom. All right, and in addition to the mandala, we have different rituals. Here we can see, usually there'll be some, this is often some guru, sometimes called a Vajra master, a Vajra guru, who will lead different ritual practices. There are mantras. These are the recitation of sounds, sometimes accompanied by musical instruments. And these sounds will call upon the names of the deity presiding in the middle, the Buddha presiding in the middle of the mandala. And these will represent enlightened sounds. So mantras are sacred sounds believed to create mental protection. Reciting the sounds will calm the mind. And ultimately, this is a very common practice said to lead to sort of a cognitive restructuring. Instead of thinking, oh, what do I have to do today? Or, oh, I remember I had this horrible fight with my friend yesterday, or what are those politicians doing? I mean, we'll look at the news. The mantra, the reciting of the name or the sounds of these enlightened beings replaces that mental chatter with, and this will create a connection with the meditational deity / enlightened Buddha in the center of the mandala. It said that through reciting these mantras, one will internalize different divine attributes. And by divine attributes, here I mean the qualities of compassion and wisdom. Mantras are said to also have magical properties, and some masters, some gurus, are believed to be able to do things like heal the ill, bring about rainfall, make sure that the harvest arrives on time. All right, and this is an image of Chenrezig. Tibetans believe that the Dalai Lama is an emanation. Remember, we talked about last class, Buddhas have different bodies. The Dalai Lama is an emanation of this being, Chenrezig, and Chenrezig, and this is Chenrezig inside his abode, his mandala. If one has a guru, one can then visualize themselves and pretend to be Chenrezig and engage in different mantras to Chenrezig. Om Mani Padme Hum is a very popular mantra that you'll hear, say, Tibetans reciting, and that's one of the mantras associated with this being. And one will visualize oneself living in the perfected universe of Chenrezig. All right, this is one mantra, Om Mani Padme Hum. Along with what one does with the mind, i.e. imagining oneself as the Buddha and imagining and meditating on the mandala, then you have one's speech, which one will engage in the mantras. There are also physical actions. These are bodily actions of an enlightened being, and these are called mudras. So let's see here. So the body, speech, and mind of a Buddha. The body of a Buddha is symbolized through the practices of the mudras. The speech is represented by the practice of mantras. And the mind, this is the visualization of the mandala and its presiding deity or Buddha or Yidam. Through the practice of Vajrayana, the body, speech, and mind of the ordinary person is transformed into the body, speech, and mind of an enlightened Buddha. All of this is to be done, however, under the guidance of a guru who knows how to engage in the complexities of these practices. And this is very brief, and there are two main stages to the practice of Vajrayana Buddhism. There's a generation stage. That's what we've been learning about. These are various rituals and visualizations to create oneself as the tantric deity, as the Buddha, and to construct one's world as the mandala. The completion stage, in very, very short, these are different yogic practices, working with energy points in the body called chakras, and working with different energy channels that connect the chakras. These are called the nadis. And working with different vital winds in the body to physically experience a rebirth as a Buddha. And this is the blissful union of wisdom and compassion, is what is symbolized by the sexual imagery. And that will conclude our discussion of Vajrayana Buddhism. As always, please stay safe, stay well, and stay tuned.